Gender differences in sports. What's the first thing that comes to mind when I just said that? Is it the pay gap between them? Maybe it's the competitiveness. Or is it something else? Like the cultural differences in how we view men's sports and how we view women's sports. Football and basketball are often seen as super manly because of how physical they are, while sports like gymnastics and figure skating are more likely to be viewed as feminine, even though both of these sports take strength and skill. These cultural norms around masculinity and femininity really shape the way athletes are perceived and treated. Social constructs of gender influence which sports are considered appropriate for men or women, and that definitely impacts everything from media coverage to funding and fan support. Now, when it comes down to the pay gap, it's not just about how good the athletes are, but it's about how we decide what's worth our attention. Men's sports get way more media coverage and sponsorship deals, which is why they make more money. But when we step back and look at how far women's sports have come, it's clear that they also deserve a lot more attention. Women athletes are super talented, but they don't always get the same chance to show what they can do. The hope is that as more people start watching and supporting women's sports, the pay gap will continue to shrink. This isn't just about sports, it's about breaking down old ideas and giving women the same chance as men. In 2018, the U.S. women's national soccer team filed a lawsuit because they were being paid way less than the men's team, even though they were winning more games and drawing in more attention. They ended up getting a $24 million settlement in 2022, but that's still not equal to the men's pay. Now let's talk about basketball.
One of the best and most well-paying jobs in the world is being an NBA player. On average, NBA players get paid about $10 million per year, and even the lowest of the low, the minimum contract players, make around $2 million per year, if not more. If you get drafted into the NBA, you are immediately a multimillionaire. And looking at Cooper Flagg, who will probably be drafted first overall this year, he's projected to be guaranteed over $60 million just by being selected first overall. While that may be a shockingly large amount of money, another shocking fact is that the WNBA, the NBA's equivalent in women's basketball, those players make on average $150,000 a year. Comparing this year's number one overall pick in the NBA draft, Cooper Flagg, to last year's number one overall pick in the WNBA draft, Caitlin Clark, and Clark, who is a generational prospect by all accounts for women's basketball, she makes $78,000 per year, which is part of a 4-year, $338,000 rookie contract. The disparity is huge among these two players and respective number one overall picks, and Caitlin Clark, in the end, will do way more for the WNBA than Cooper Flagg will ever do for the NBA. There is no way that that is a fair comparison between two of each of the league's brightest young stars. And like I said, Caitlin Clark is the most marketable women's basketball player of all time. Now, the WNBA just secured an 11-year, $2.2 billion media rights deal with Disney's Amazon Prime Video and NBC combined. So they should be making a little bit more money, and the salary cap and things should be able to increase starting with the 2026 season, as the deal should bring in approximately $200 million for the league. But that is absolutely nothing compared to the NBA's new 11-year, $77 billion media rights deal with ESPN, Amazon, and NBC beginning in the same season. The WNBA does not get nearly as much pay or recognition, and culturally, there's a problem with that, which relates to what we talk about every day in anthropology.
It's kind of a cycle. Less exposure means less money, and less money means less support and resources for growth. So while the difference in pay might be tied to money and viewership, we can't just ignore how much culture and media shape what people choose to watch in the first place. Society has certain ideas about what's considered manly and feminine, and that affects how we see athletes in sports. During my interview with one of my friends, I asked what was his opinion on the differences between men's and women's sports. Here's a summary of his response.
Honestly, I get why men's sports are more popular and get paid more. More people watch them, more sponsorships, more money. But then I started noticing how women's sports are growing, and I realized they don't even get the same chances to prove themselves.
He also said that it's not about how good the athletes actually are, it's about who gets the spotlight. And that kind of puts into perspective of how the media affects what we think about gender differences in sports. I also asked a lady friend of mine the same question, and here's her response.
Women's sports deserve more recognition and pay. It's frustrating because women athletes work just as hard as men. The real change will come when we stop assuming women's sports aren't as competitive. If women's sports got the same exposure, I think that gap would start to close.
If women's sports gets the same level of exposure, support, and hype that men's sports do, there's a good chance that the gap in pay and recognition would start to shrink. It's not about money. It's about changing how people view women athletes and about giving them the spotlight that they deserve. She seems hopeful that things will move in the right direction, even if it's a slow process. So what can we do about it? Well, from talking to my friends and looking at the data in the articles, it's clear that women's sports are on the rise. If institutions provided equal access to media representation, corporate sponsorships, and fan engagement, we could start to challenge the gendered power dynamics embedded in sports culture. This issue goes beyond athletics. It reflects broader social ideologies about gender and what forms of labor are seen as valuable. It's about questioning hegemonic norms and working towards cultural transformation. Progress is happening slowly through cases like the women's soccer team and continued advocacy within the WNBA. These are signs of a shifting culture narrative around gender equity in sport. It's going to take time, but every small step counts.